Welcome to the 8th episode of the Where Zone podcast, hosted by Chandler Dantzler. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and watch on YouTube. Today we have former scout, professional player, and USA coach Terrence Freeman. We're pumped to have you on the show.
Hey, good morning. Thanks so much for.
Yep. Before we start talking about your career, I'd like to start off the podcast with this question: who is Terrence Freeman for the people that don't know?
Well, thank you so much, man. Again, Terrence Freeman is just an all-around good guy, and I jokingly say that. But no, father of 5 kids, 4 daughters, and a son. They're all amazing and athletic. I've been fortunate in life to have played baseball from T-ball all the way up to the professional ranks. Got a chance to get an at bat one time in a big league game, and that to me is one of the highlights. Pinch hit for a guy named Juan Gonzalez back in the day, which is a pretty funny story. But played 6 years in the minor leagues, oftentimes injured, played hard. When I retired, ended up going into and was an associate scout for 6 or 7 years afterwards with the Rays, the Giants, and the Rockies. A little bit fast pitch softball, and then did some international baseball with USA, traveling all over the world. And most recently, the first pick in the draft, Paul Skeens, was one of my players that I selected on the team that I managed when we went to Mexico to play.
That's awesome. Before we start with the first topic, you started playing professional baseball for 6 years with 3 different teams. Just talk about that experience and what it was like getting drafted.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you what. I was fortunate enough to play for 6 years, and I was a kid that grew up without a lot. We were not poor, but man, by no means were we rich. I often say that we made a penny more than what we considered to be poor, so we didn't get a lot of the government assistance that probably would have helped put my family over the edge. And so, at the age of 15, my mom told me, "I can't afford to pay for you to go to college, and you need to earn a scholarship." And so I chose to really focus on my academics, and I played sports so I wouldn't get distracted with a lot of my friends and my peers who were out doing some things that I knew how that story ended. My oldest brother was incarcerated as a child when I was growing up, would always tell me, "Don't do what he did and waste my athletic ability selling drugs." A lot of my best friends in high school became parents at early ages. And so I booked it, played every sport. Baseball was not my first love. Basketball was. But did one thing in front of the right scout, which was I hit a ball to a pitcher that everybody was there to see. The pitcher took his time and lobbed it to first base, and I beat it out. And every scout afterwards stood up and just started watching. And they said, "Do you know what you ran time-wise?" And I'm like, "No, sir." And he shows me to stop watching. None of that meant anything to me back then. It means a lot now. I understand it. Mm-hmm. But on a ball to the pitcher, I ended up running, I want to say 3.85. And at that time, it meant nothing. But he said, "Terrence, the major league average, this was at 93, was 4.2. And you did that on a ball to a pitcher that you knew you'd probably be out of." And so that's kind of the story of my life now. I'm in politics, formerly the president of city council, but everything I do hard. But baseball took me around the world. I got to see places that I would have never seen, played in 35 states, been in 5 countries, learned a lot about different cultures, about a lot of different people, and learned to really appreciate people and cultures through my exposure from baseball.
That's awesome. All right. What positions did you play while you were playing?
So I was drafted as an Ozzie Smith prototype. I used to run out and do backflips when I ran on the field. I was a little switch hitter. I was 127 pounds when I graduated from high school. So I was a tiny guy. And at that time, that was when there was a shift from the fast, light hitting, good defending middle infielder to a guy named Alex Rodriguez, Nomar Garcia-Parra, Derek Jeter. You had all these 6-foot-plus guys. Prior to them, Cal Ripken was really the only one. Cal Ripken Jr. And so they wanted more power out of me. Wasn't going to happen. I was a guy that would lay down a bunt, move the ball around the park on the ground and just try to beat it out. But that's what I was drafted as in the 15th round out of high school.
Gotcha. All right. What was your biggest challenge moving through higher levels of baseball past college?
I'll tell you the biggest challenge for me, and I'm sure many others, and it's why I went on in my studies and got my higher level degrees in sports psychology, was trying to figure out, did I belong? You go from little league, and then you get to high school where you're the big fish in a small pond, and then you get to college, and all of a sudden that pond gets a little bigger, but you still can find your way a little quicker.
Yeah,
When you get into professional ranks, you're with the best of the best around the world.
for sure.
They always said that funnel kind of goes down, and as it gets smaller, 2% of all the players, and this is back when they used to tell us, of all the players in the world make it into professional baseball, 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And then of that 2%, a fraction of a percent make it to the major leagues. And so that was the biggest challenge for me. I played in the 90s, so a lot of guys were getting big really quick. How they were doing it, who knows? Some say, they were finding competitive advantages, but I didn't know anything about that stuff, and nor would I have chosen to.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a challenge really trying to fit in physically, challenge trying to fit in mentally. But I stuck around. I was a good clubhouse guy, played hard, did the right thing, was a captain on every team, and loved the experience enough that when I finished, I was with the Tigers at the time. They wanted me to come in and coach, and I chose to go back to school and then be an associate scout while I was in school.
That's great. All right, let's move on here. After your professional career, you were the assistant softball coach at the University of North Florida for a little over 2 years. Just talk about how you started coaching in softball.
Well, funny story is I was rehabbing to try to get back into professional baseball, and one of my good friends, Gil Morales, was coaching a youth travel team. And so he's like, why don't you come out and just help us out? And so I would go out and work out with this team. They were 13 at the time. And one of the parents on the team, his son was a catcher. He was the athletic director at University of North Florida. And he asked me, what's your plan if you don't go back and play? And I said, I'm going back to school. And he said, well, here's my card. We just started a sport management program. You say you want to be a general manager in baseball one day. Give it a thought. And I did. And so when I followed up, he says, and by the way, I'll have a job for you. And that was the job he had, was coaching fast pitch softball. And still to this day, I've never played a game. I've never played one pitch of fast pitch softball. But it was some of the best times of my life coaching it, because that game was so fast. The girls were so phenomenal that it was a really close comparison to the speed of the game that I was just finished playing, retiring from playing at. But yet how you coached the athletes was a little different in the approach from how I was coaching the former professional players that I was working out with and training.
Gotcha.
But it was a great experience.
That's awesome. All right. You also held the position of an MLB Scout Associate for 7 years with 3 different teams. Tell us a little about that and what the position entails.
Yeah, so an associate scout really is an area guy that assists the regional scout. Jacksonville at that time, and this was in, again, the early 2000s, Jacksonville had kind of become noted as this place that we called it the armpit of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so not a lot of scouts really wanted to come all the way up here to kind of see one player or 2 players and bear down on them. And so I had some buddies that were scouting, and they called and asked, hey, would you cover the Jacksonville region for me? And I said, absolutely. And so it didn't require me to be on the road traveling all over the state. I just had to make sure I knew of every player in the greater Jacksonville area, and lay eyes on players. So I did that for the Rays. I did it for the Giants. I did it for the Rockies. And then finally I just said, okay, enough's enough.
Yeah. All right. What was the main thing you looked at in a player as an MLB scout?
Well, I mean, when you're looking at professional baseball, there's measurables are the first things that, you're always looking at, the tools.
Yeah.
And in my case, I always knew who the top players were. And so I got a chance to kind of follow them from, freshman year all the way to their senior year and just see how the development goes. So once you get through the measurables, the intangibles are the next thing. But for me, a lot of times, if, a kid just had a very bad attitude, didn't handle failure well, I didn't really focus as much as on how far he hit home runs, because I was like, those are far and few between. But that failure is going to happen the majority of the time. And if he's struggling with it now, how risky is it investing a lot of money in him knowing that he may be a kid that just breaks down mentally and doesn't make it.
Yep. All right. And in 2013 to 2014, you started your journey as a USA coach and manager. You coached the 12U national team and traveled to Taiwan. Give us some insight on what that was like.
Man, one of the best experiences of my life. I tell people, if you haven't had a chance or if you get a chance to coach with USA Baseball, do it. The fraternal bond is like none other. You deal with the best players in the world. And so I got a chance to be an assistant coach on the team that went to Taiwan. And on that team, you know, a notable name that you guys would probably recognize is Anthony Volpe, shortstop with the Yankees. But there were numerous other first rounders on that team, guys that have gone on to have amazing careers. But what I learned was this: America is the king of baseball. And when we traveled to Taiwan and we had those three letters on our chest, USA, everywhere we went, people wanted to stop and talk to us.
That's
Every
great.
team we played, Panama, Ecuador, Venezuela, they gave us their absolute best. And I think we lost one game in that tournament. The team dogpiled in a pool play game. And that really showed the significance of the respect that we have around the country as the greatest country in the world. And so when I managed, you know, I would tell our teams, do you know why they revere us so much? And they're like, why? I'm like, because these three letters, USA, they mean hope. They know that each of you, if you don't make it in baseball, you still will have a chance to live out the American dream.
Yep.
Go to school, go into the trades, have a great job, get a house, have a family, and be very successful in life.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. You spent over 10 years as a teacher, principal, and baseball coach. How rewarding is it to watch players you have coached succeed in their careers in other areas in their lives?
I'll tell you what, it's amazing. I mean, I'm fortunate enough now to be a father, so I can't compare it to the same joy that I have with my kids. But for me, coaching is a ministry. My father was a pastor, my brother's a pastor, my mom was a social worker. And so to know that I'm able to play a small role leveraging the platform of baseball and softball to really help kids learn how to make good decisions, learn how to deal with failure, so that when they go into this tough real world, they're better equipped to take those lessons that they learn on the field and turn those to life lessons that they execute off of the field. I couldn't be more proud. And I have kids, players now that are attorneys, judges, big leaguers, coaching in the big leagues, across the gamut, teachers, doctors. And so I'm always excited when I get a chance to catch back up with them.
That's awesome. All right. What are the difference between being a player and a coach?
I'll tell you what, the intensity is the same. The will to compete is the same. You know, I always tell my teams, you know, we play this game because, one, we love it, but I always say I hate losing more than I like winning. So I don't really make winning the emphasis. Now, when I was a player, 100%, it was all about winning, competing hard, because my job was in the line. As a coach, it's a different dynamic that I'm taking. Because, as I shared earlier, winning off of the field is equally as important to me as the kids winning on the field. And when you're a player, you have the ability to solely focus on balls and strikes, home runs, singles, doubles, and let everything else take care of itself outside of those lines.
Right.
As coaches, we don't.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to the next topic. I want to talk about relationships you can build while playing baseball and coaching baseball. Most people build lifetime relationships playing baseball. Tell us about some of the relationships you have built with some of your friends in your career.
I tell athletes all the time in any sport, and particularly baseball, which is my love, is the best networking tool ever. I use that word fraternal bond earlier with USA Baseball, and so companies, I'm now in my life as an elected official, and in working in the private sector with Miller Electric, that we hire people. And I understand that when I'm getting an athlete, similar to getting someone from the military, I'm getting someone that is competitive, that's driven, that has a certain set of disciplines that we know they want to play hard and work hard to get to that next level. So for me, that's what I did. And, I never once thought twice about picking up a phone if I'm in a new city and I want to catch up with a buddy and learn more about how this city works and what are ways that I can be more successful with my job in this city. And that's what playing sports does. It just makes it casts your net wider of influence.
Yep. All right. How do you use baseball now to help the community?
Tons of ways. So, I mean, one of the big things that I love doing is I host a free camp every year in one of our areas of our community where baseball is just not as prevalent. You know, you can find a great pickup football game, a basketball game, but baseball has priced itself out for a lot of people. And I would have been one of those kids growing up. So that to me is one of the highlights every year. I do it from ages 3 to 19. So you can only imagine the difference of skill levels between them. Mm-hmm. And every year I average anywhere from 75 to 100 kids, and it's the best time ever.
That's great. All right, let's kind of take it away from baseball real quick. You started getting the political side around 2014, and you're recently the city council president of Jacksonville. Why did you get into politics, and have you always wanted to be in politics?
So no, I didn't want to always be a politician because I didn't know what one was. You know, I like to consider myself a statesman as opposed to a politician. But about 7, 8 years ago, really going on 10 now, I guess, I kept seeing on the news awful things happen to the kids in certain parts of our city, mm-hmm. and said that I can make a difference. Somebody stood up and said, Terrence, I want to help you be successful in life. And they bought me my first glove. They paid for me to go to my first baseball camp. And that's what really helped create this love of sports for me. And so they told me the best way to have an impact in a kid's life would be through policy making. Mm-hmm. Didn't know what a city council member was back then. But I said, okay, I'm doing it. And it's a long story, but eventually I ended up getting appointed by a governor, serving, getting reelected then a couple of years ago, and just recently reelected again. But I love to say I treat politics like sports. I understand that in sports, you know, you're going to have highs and lows. Every now and then a fastball is going to get away from a pitcher and it might hit me, but I don't take it personal. I used to sprint to first base and then still second, still third, and score. So mm-hmm. I treat it in politics. So when the name calling comes and when the naysayers come yelling and screaming, I treat it as fans that paid, you know, $5 to come yell at me and eat a hot dog while they were eating a hot dog and drinking a beer. And I just focused on, I'm in the batter's box to do the work that I'm here to do. And that's to take this fastball and hit it in the right center gap and finish with a triple.
Oh, for sure. All right. Are there any similarities between your role in baseball and politics?
A ton of them, man. The ability to focus. You know, I can vividly still remember playing in a game in Portland, Oregon, 30,000 people in the stands. It's like a 4th of July game, 2 outs, 2 strikes. I'm the batter in the box. And how loud that place was all the way until the umpire pointed his finger and told the pitcher to go. And how I don't recall hearing a sound until he threw about a 95-mile-per-hour fastball on the black away. I look back, the umpire's like, strike 3! And then the crowd erupts again. And so that ability to be able to block out the noise, to block out distractions, and to focus solely on the task at hand. You know, as batters in baseball, when you're struggling hitting the curveball, you go in that cage and you're working on it, just really being able to focus on little things, take that time to put the extra work in, and then get back in the game and try to make that adjustment. That's how it is in politics. Things change quickly. They move fast. The media is always watching, and you just got to be nimble and be ready, thick skin.
Yep, for sure. All right. It is obvious that you have a heart for kids in many areas. You are currently the manager of an apprenticeship program with Miller Electric. Can you tell us about that and how rewarding that is?
I love it, man. That's actually where I'm heading right now, is to have a meeting with the Boys and Girls Club in Orlando this year. But, you know, a lot of times in these communities where you find people struggling financially, it's because they lack hope. They don't see a chance or a way for them to really break through. And when I would ask them, you know, hey, what's the best way I can help you? I came into politics to help you. They said a job. And so at Miller Electric, what I love is not only do we offer a job, we offer jobs that lead to careers in the trades. And so a lot of times these families and these kids never knew that being an electrician could be so rewarding financially and so rewarding as a career, because you become a licensed journeyman when you complete our apprenticeship program. Mm-hmm. So I get the pleasure every day of driving to various schools, community centers, and sharing of all the good things that we do at Miller, where we are trying to attract, develop, amplify, and mobilize talent. And we do a good job at it. We're very intentional.
That's great. We got one more question here. If you could give any advice to someone wanting to play at the next level, what would you say to them?
I would say this: understand that baseball is a game. It's not life. Baseball is a game of failure, and you're really measured on how well you handle it. You know, guys in the Hall of Fame failed 70% of the time, but they're in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So first thing is understand that there was only one perfect person to walk on this earth. The next thing I would say is that, and I say it this way, it somewhat becomes a job. So when I coach kids, I always say, if you have 7 classes in school, baseball becomes your 8. Now keep your priorities in order: your faith, your family, school or job, and then baseball. Keep your priorities in order. But if you do not put that up there in that list, then at some point you're going to burn out.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right, Terrence, thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about your career.
My pleasure, Chan. Thanks so much for having me, man. You have a great day.
Yes, sir. You too.